Hello, everyone. Welcome to join our webinar. How are you today? In today's event, we will share everything you're interested about cybersecurity. During the presentations later, if you have any questions, please leave messages on the question board. The speakers will answer accordingly during the Q&A session. In addition to that, you're going to have a chance to try our automatic product security assessment platform for free, or 50% off for the CTIA cybersecurity test. As long as you fill out the questionnaire, that will pop out on your screen after finish today's webinar. Okay, today's first topic will be presented by Daniel Liu, Director of Technical Service of Onward Security. He's going to show us how to win IoT opportunities through cybersecurity compliance. Let's welcome Daniel.
Hello, this is Daniel, and I'm from Onward Security. And just like the ginger say, I am the director of technical service division, and I am leading the team to provide security assessment service such as like the web application, mobile application, and IoT device security assessment. And today, it's very honored to be here to introduce about the IoT cybersecurity assessment service. And we will let everybody know the current IoT product vulnerability and a major customer security requirement from regulation or some big organization like Amazon. And we also introduce about CTIA IoT cybersecurity certification, and also introduce how our security help our customer to fulfill the security requirement from their customer or another government. And first of all, and I will introduce about IoT vulnerabilities. And according to the research, and the people say, around 57% of IoT devices are vulnerable for medium and high severity vulnerability. It means the attacker can use this kind of vulnerability to make your device cannot work, or use this vulnerability to get control of your devices. And for these IoT vulnerabilities, and it may cost more than 50,000, 500,000 cost per month. Okay. Yeah, let me show you some real case. So in Taiwan, a lot of IP camera manufacturer in Taiwan, and like D-Link, ASUS, GeoVision, and the Uncrest. And a lot of the IP camera manufacturers, and some of them, and due to the poor or core, so there are some vulnerability exist in their devices. For example, for this device, and there is this two vulnerability, and exist on their proprietary protocol. And there is the backdoor, sorry, not a backdoor, there is the management service running on the 377.774 port. And the research say they have the remote authenticate stack overflow and the null pointer dereference vulnerability. So the attacker can use this vulnerability to get the control of your devices. And the other one is Lightning. They also produce a lot of IP camera and network video recorder. And the research say, and they found the hardcore login credential. It means that someone can use some credential account and its password to log into your devices and do the control your device, to change the configuration, to stop your IP camera. And they're also vulnerable for command injection and the page reversal. And the attacker can just easily use these two vulnerability to get the information from your devices, and use a command injection vulnerability to execute any kind of system command on your product, do anything. And let me show you some example. And for example, if your network devices or IoT device, sometimes you may provide a time setting feature in your product, and you can set the NTP server on your product. And in our experience, so we can type the input the normal NTP server IP address into the configuration interface. And after we submit the list request to the devices, and we intercept this request and try to change the payload for some system command, then we can ask the device to download the backdoor from internet and running the backdoor on their devices. Then we can just use the IP address to connect to this device and get the system control. And we can get everything from your devices, like the password or system setting or any kind of service developed by your company. And for the second, the vulnerability. So sometimes the devices open some network service. For example, sometimes your device is based on Android. So Android, they have the remote ADB interface while running on TCP 5555 TCP port. And sometimes your developer forgot to turn it off or enable the authentication mechanism. So we can just use the ADB tool to connect your devices to the TCP 5555, and we can get the ADB shell, so control your devices. And most of the time, sometimes you can get the label access, or you can get the system access from the devices. Then you can execute some command, or you can use some vulnerability to get the root label access. Then, and we know a lot of IoT devices use some open source to implement some network service, like the DNS Mccarthy as your DNS service, or like HTTP as your HTTP service, and BlueZ as your Bluetooth stack. And sometimes if you use the old version of this open source library, so attacker may use this vulnerability and to try to get a system control by this network service. And for the IoT devices, a lot of the research, they will use the hardware attacks, because we can get the devices. So we can use the Scooter to disassemble your device and to manually review your PCB board, try to find the important component on your PCB board, like the main IC, your flash memory, and try to find some debug pin like the UR, DATEC, or I2C. And the research and the hacker can use this kind of interface, debug interface, to get the system of control. And sometimes you even need the credential. You don't need the account and password. You can just connect to the UR interface and press enter on your laptop. You can get the system shell. So you can use the root level access to control your device to get anything you want. You can pack your file system to do the further reverse engineering, try to find a vulnerability. And one more thing, because the IoT device need to update, so they provide a firmware file to update your IoT devices. So it is very important to how to protect your firmware file. So if you use the wrong way to protect your firmware file, so some attacker or hacker or researcher, they will use the way try to analyze your firmware file and try to how to your device verify this firmware file is correct or not. So for example, we just download the firmware file from their website, and we got we decrypt the firmware file and find how they process the firmware binary file. Then we can use the easy string search to find how you encrypt your firmware file. They just use the OpenSSL and use the easy password to encrypt the device. So we can use the same way to make the new malicious firmware and use the same way to encrypt and pack your firmware file and try to dispute on some forum to let another user to download the malicious firmware and install on your devices. And this is the one way to separate your malicious firmware file. And so for this, we know a lot of the IoT vulnerability, and why IoT product security is important, because maybe in the 5 or 7 years ago, the cybersecurity is the nice to have. So it is better to do the security assessment, but in recent years, and I think the cybersecurity assessment for this kind of IoT device is must to have, not nice to have, because more and more IoT security event and more government, they have their cybersecurity requirement, and not even the government, some global buyer like we know the Huawei, Vodafone, Verizon, the big carrier in United States and Europe, they also have their security requirement for the network devices or IoT devices. And sometimes you want to sell a product to some region like the California in United States or in Europe, they also have their security regulation for this kind of IoT devices. So you have to meet the security requirement from the global buyer or the government. So if you cannot fulfill the requirement, your device cannot sell to the buyer or sell a lost country. But for example, I think this is the most famous one this year because the SB 327 in United States, they have the regulation for the IoT devices, and it become operative on this January 1st. So it means every IoT devices, you have unique login password, or your device have to contain the security feature to ask the user to change their new password at their initial setup. So because we know that Mirai malware use the password guessing attack for each IoT devices. So because they use the same password, so the SB327, they ask all IoT device to change the default password. So every device uses a different password, so the malware cannot easily spread to another devices. And in Europe, we have the ETSI TS103 645 for this technical specification. So they also introduce how the IoT device should be tested for the security. And I think the new standard called ETSI EN 303 645 and will release this year or next year. Okay, and also in Asia and in Japan, they also have some requirements about IoT devices. So we both know, so from the Western and Eastern, they also have the security requirement for IoT security requirement for the product. So, and I think the IoT security is more and more important. So, and also some big international buyers like the Amazon, they also have their security regulation or security requirement. We both know that Amazon has the Alexa service, so you can use the smart speaker to speak to them, say hi Alexa, and you can ask them to do something, to buy a pizza or to call a cab, a taxi. So for each device, they will connect to the Alexa cloud services. So the Amazon want to open the Alexa service to all the device makers. They can use the Alexa service. So they have the one requirement for this manufacturer. They say, if you want to use our cloud service, so your devices, your smart speaker have to pass all the testing from the Amazon, including the acceptance test, functional testing, acoustics, and music testing. And I think the most special one is the security testing. So I think the most Amazon very focused on the security. So they also authorize 5 security labs in the world to provide a security service. And I think our security is one of them to provide Amazon Alexa security service. So if in the future your product want to accredit by or cooperate with the Amazon Alexa department, so your device needs a security assessment, I think our security can provide security assessment service for you to fulfill the security requirement from Amazon. And let me introduce about Alexa, the security requirement. I think we can divide into the 6 major part. The first one is about the connection. So your device connect to Alexa cloud service, you have to use the the secure TLS connection, and you have to find a way to anti-man-in-the-middle attack. And sometimes you use some accessory like the headphone or your watch. They will use the Bluetooth connect to your cell phone, your mobile phone. You have to use the secure carrier mechanism. And for all interface, if they provide an authentication mechanism, so for all the password, you have to enforce the user to change the default password, and you cannot use any kind of maintenance account, backdoor account your devices. And for the software part, you should prevent use the vulnerable library. So it means you have to check all the open source you use, and it cannot exist any known vulnerability in your open source library, and try to make sure all the network service are necessary. You should remove all unnecessary network service from your product. And for for every input from the user or network, so you have to check the length, the content, and the format for this input to prevent the people try to conduct or perform the command injection, forward workflow, this kind of attack. And for the firmware, you should try to implement a secure firmware update mechanism to make sure only authorize and authenticate the firmware file can be upgraded on your devices. And for the hardware view, so you should implement the secure way to control your microphone. It means if someone they use the button to click to turn off the microphone, you have to provide your design document to prove when the people turn off the microphone, your smart speaker cannot receive any voice. And you should also remove all the hardware debug interface to prevent the attack user interface to get into your system. And this is the security requirement from Amazon. And sometimes the people want to get a certification from some organization. And in United States, there is we have the association called CTIA. The CTIA is such a big and important organization in the North America, and it's sponsored by the major carrier in the United States. They organize a lot of the working group, and one of them they propose the IoT cybersecurity certification program, and they also authorize the CATO, we call the CTIA authorized testing lab. They authorize the CATO to provide a testing service. And our security is the first one in Asia, and is the CTIA authorized IoT cybersecurity laboratory. So we can provide a CTIA certification service. So your product just have the network connection interface like 4G LTE, 5G NR, or the Wi-Fi. If you have one of LAN connection, so your device is qualified to get a certification from CTIA, and they have 3 different kind of level of certification. For the level 1 is the core security, for level 2 is enhanced security, and level 3 for advanced security. So you can determine your requirement, and you can determine which level you want to get a certification. You can choose yourself. And for the CTIA process, so for the first one, you have to choose the lab, like the onboard security, to provide perform the pre-certification service to make sure your device is to fulfill the security requirement from the CTIA. Then after you pass all the pre-certification testing, then you can initiate the certification process on the CTIA website. Then the CTIA website will notify the onboard security to perform the formal run testing for the IoT security certification. Then we will upload the testing report to the CTIA. Then the CTIA will review and issue a certification for your product. Okay, so I think for the regulation and not only from the government view, so also another international organization and some association, they also have their cybersecurity schema to make sure your product is secure. Then the last part is we will let the body know how our security help our customer, the device maker, IoT maker, to enhance their product security. And sometimes the first one, the level one, the easy level to get into the security is you can use the tools to perform the self-check. Sometimes you can buy some commercial tool to perform the security check. And our security, we have our sec device and sec flow that we can get some security information and do the security assessment itself, automatic security testing. And our device also acquired by international awards, so you can make PN QA to easily perform the security assessment and collect this kind of vulnerability information. And for level 2, sometimes you think the self-testing is not good enough. So sometimes you may entrust the professional third-party lab like our security to perform the penetration testing or security assessment. So our security, we have the ISO 17025 accredited testing lab, and we can perform every kind of the security assessment or certification testing service from our security. And then we can help our customer to build the product security program. So you can use we have our professional and experienced consultant team, so they can help our customer to implement the good way to implement the secure product. And then we can the top level is introduce the device Devops. And we also have another accredited laboratory, so we can do the assessment by some international cybersecurity standard like IEC 62443, -4-2 and -4-1. So we have our accredited testing that we can use review your procedure and do a security assessment, try to make sure you fulfill the security requirement for this kind of international cybersecurity standard. And I think this is today's presentation. I hope this information is good for you. And if you have any question, you can leave in the message, and we will answer this question after all the session. And next part, we will introduce the Mr. King from the Incenary, and he has a topic about the open source library issue. It's just like I mentioned in the previous slide, and like the Amazon, they very focused on care about the open source library vulnerability. So in today's meeting, we invite the Incenary to talk about the open source library, and then let's welcome Mr. King to have a topic for us.
Thank you, Daniel. Hi, this is my name is Yeon Kim. I'm the product manager and sales change manager in the Incenary. Today, I'm gonna talk about open source software, that what you need to know about when you're using it, open source software. So if you've seen any logo in this page, that means you know what open source it is. And then if you're using one of these software, that means it's also you're using open source software. So it's open software is been in the market for a long time. As you know, this came from a report from Black Dog that said that 65% of the software had been developed by open source software, and open source software is 96% is they scanned it everywhere. So open source software had been used in every software in last decade. So why open source is important? Because it's already done. So you just copy and paste, or you can downloading it, using it. So it's really saving your time and money. So that means fast time to market. So when you make a product, it's critical that you have reduced time to send it to your product or service the market. So that's time that you can save. Also, cost saving. It's already done, so you don't need to worry about make another new one because it's already in there. So you just saving it. Independency. So one of our clients right now is the finance client in South Korea. Finance sector, they already like to use their commercial software, which is Oracle and other software. But in this time, they're looking for open source software because they want to save some time and also save the cost. Because Oracle cost is really growing every month, every year. So that's why they want to get out of their domain. So that mean open source doesn't have any kind of the restriction. So that's why they're using open source in their mind right now. So when you're using open source, there's some concern that you need to know, which is that safe? Is there any other problem that should I know people using open source? So how we manage that if they have one of those? So there's some certain concern about open source, and then we are here to help you to solve the problem that you may have when you're using open source. So the pain point, as I mentioned previously, is what's the open source and mention it. And open source is not free. So people think that open source is for free software, but it's not. You have to do something else. So you may heard about open source license. So open source has their license. It's not free software. So in here, you can see all different open source, which is here is only the famous open source, well-known open source license here. These open source had all the separate subnated different source code. It's like 10,000 different open source license in here. So this is main problem. So when you using or you choose open source, you have to know that, okay, so what kind of open source license has been used, that software that you want to use. So here, I'm gonna present 4 different sources, which is, that's the big 4 name is GPL, LGPL, MIT, and Apache. So any open source software must have one of the license, not just 4, but different 4 here. So you need to be careful when you choose software that what kind of software that license they had in their software. So you have to compliance with their open source license. Here is like 6 different license, but you can see they have different type, different kind of copyright protection, and then it could be used commercial software, if not, and to have to using their source code released on the website. So here's different open source and different type of source and different type of compliance. As you can see on the bottom column that where famous thing, Kubernetes is Apache and Flutter is BSD. Qt, maybe you're using Qt is LGPL 3, not GPL 3. So you have to follow certain rule that comply with the open source license. So this is actually short checklist for license. This is a very, very simple version of checklist that when you're using the software, open source software, and you know that what kind of license you have in that software, you have to follow this step. It's a very, very simple step. So you can see the LGPL, you have to link the type and then source code available, and you have to publishing that this is GPL license they have. So you need to follow certain rule to comply with their license. This is a very, very short list of license. So what happened if you didn't follow the compliance? This is a very famous incident from the GPL. Hancom is a very famous company in South Korea. They using their software, it named Ghost Script, which is the software make that documentation to converting to the PDF file. They fail to comply their requirement, even though they're willing to pay, but open source software, their license, doesn't need to pay. They need you to follow certain rule that they have in their software. So I think that they are make us some settlement. They pay up, and then they pay their own licensee, and then they just holding solve the problem. But this is famous. There is another case that I'm gonna present here. I'm gonna point out here the Patrick Mccarthy, which is very famous for this enforcement case. We're gonna mention it later, more detail about the Patrick Mccarthy. So there are the Sitecom, Bonnet, D-Link, Skype, Pantech, and any more. So we have one of the China company. They said they've been enforced by the law because they are not complying with their license information. Well, I'm gonna talk about later. I'm not gonna release their name, but I'm gonna talk about later with the president, Patrick Mccarthy case. So this is the Patrick Mccarthy case. You think that if you didn't follow the compliant open license, it doesn't hurt anything, but it is. So this copyright law, they enforce you to copyright it. If you didn't follow the rule they set up or with the open source license, they sue you and get some money out of it. The problem is, once they settle down, they're not just stopping it. So there's another case that they came back several times to same company get some money out of it, which is Patrick Mccarthy. This is guy, the contributor, which is the developer for Linux networking stack, Netflix. Not Netflix, Netflater. So this is a famous networking stack that every Linux system using this thing. And then he had certain node, which is GPL, and GPL, every single time the company using their Linux, something like that, they have to follow GPL license, which is you release source code, you have to publishing it, you using the GPL license software, kind of that. Also, you have to send a compact disk or thumb drive if the customer want to have their own source code from you. So this is not each case to follow the compliant, the open source license. But Patrick Mccarthy know that it's hard to follow, so that he looking for some company that using his code and cannot comply with the compliance with the GPL. And then he personally, to the company, get some money out of it. And then once their settlement documentation, he said it's not the final settle down. So like a year or something, he come back to the same company and they see they're complying with the license. If not, he sued again and get some money over it. So there are some few company in China, Japan that has been attacked and several times again and again. So this is a thing that you need concern about open source license. So another pain point in open source is open source literally open. It's everywhere. So it's different commercial software. Commercial software have one vendor, and then they will take care of responsibility everything. But open source is everywhere. Anybody who can develop source code, they can be contributor, or they can be examiner, anything. And then actually they have some security problem, they don't care. Actually they care in this day, but it's not follow the one vendor, took care of everything, took responsible of every single thing. So as I said, the problem is it's everywhere. You can download the source code by GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, any repository they have on the internet. So you can go to the internet and download source code and can examine it and see their security vulnerability. You can hack it, that's their system or service. So we have some statistics here that every open source software has been used in the market had 67% has been source code open source, and then they have 50% of vulnerability high. So once they have secure vulnerability, they have 4 different types based on their severity. So the highest is critical, high, medium, and low. So when they have find out vulnerability, 50% of vulnerability is more than high. This is 2017 statistics, but if you go into 2019, still they have had 75% has open source software they're using in the market has at least one secure vulnerability, and then this vulnerability, half of this vulnerability is more than high severity, which is a big impact on your system or service if somebody hack it. This came from 2020. So vulnerability is getting harder and harder. As you can see, it's going up. Last year, it's a little bit down, but last 4 years, it's bigger than last 10 years. So it's going higher and higher. There people looking for some more vulnerability, find out information and something. So I'm gonna presenting to you the famous breach is, you may have heard of Heartbleed. This is 2014. They software released 2011, but it's been 3 years, and then they found the discovery to find information. The most recent one is 2017 is Equifax. The Equifax is company that had been monitoring the credit from the United States. So when you have credit score, you know that how financially you are reliable. So this is that some service that the United States people using that one, and it happened 2017 March. So 2017 March, they found the security vulnerability. Also, they gave remediation too. So this Equifax had been notified from the government authority, said that, hey, we found new security vulnerability here, and then remediation is here, which is how you fix the problem. And then actually Equifax looking for the information. I mean, their security vulnerability they have them, but in 2 months they couldn't find any of those. They don't know what they have in their system. And then it had been on May, the hacker looking for information and get some personal information from their server and saving it. And I think September, the hacker contact Equifax said that, hey, we have your database in our hand. So what you gonna do? The database the hacker had is 145 million people information they have. So this is a big problem. When they release this problem news, the CEO, CSIO from Equifax has been resigned, and they're been through the hearing from the U.S. Congress or Senator. Eventually, it's from the I think last year, they paid $650 million to 2007 data breach. So this is a very, very serious problem. So the clarity, what we can do is open source. We can check out your open source, your software, find the information about what kind of secret vulnerability you have, and then what kind of license you have in your software. So this is how we're gonna do. People think that we're using the checksum or hash, but we don't use checksum or hash. We use our own technology, which we call the fingerprint. There's some information could never ever change from the source code to binary file. This information, we collecting it from our database. And then once you give the binary file you want to check, we have same technology extracting the information from your binary file and then match with our database. In that case, we can see that what kind of source has been used in your binary. And then we're gonna show you that the software that you use in your binary had any secure vulnerability or did there any license information that you need concern to use your software. So this is the whole our service that we can give you. It's very brief information. If somebody else want to know about more information on this one, let me know. Then we're gonna show you the information that this is very short list. Just general system overview about the Insight Clarity. So we, as I said, we scan the binary code, and then we have MVD, is the National Vulnerability Database, which is funded by US government, and they collect all information about security vulnerability and then put in the one site. So we're gonna go, Insight Clarity go up there, find information security vulnerability. If they're a new one, they're gonna downloading it and match with our database. And then if they found something that had been discovered recently, which is not in the database, we just download the file information and put it in our database. It only took 24 hours. So if some new vulnerability had been uploading to MVD site within 24 hours, we can see the information and then we can push you to your system if you internet connection connect, and then you can see the alert that new security vulnerability has been released. You need to concern about it. So this is the our service very real time. This the screen on your side, you can see the dashboard. This is for the or CIO, CEO something. With this screen, you can see that how your organization manage open source, or better or bad, good or bad, because we have grade. This is B grade. We grade A, B, C, D. So A is good, D is in your big problem. So another feature that I mentioned, Patrick Mccarthy, we also give information about that Patrick Mccarthy code has been used in your binary file. So you can stay away from the Captain troll because we show the SFC, Software Freedom Conservancy, is another organization that's looking for copyright, not troll, but copyright very aggressively acting organization. Mccarthy, as I mentioned, Patrick Mccarthy is always looking for some chance to get some money out of your company. Pet mode is more like an encrypted module that has been used by an OpenSSL everywhere. Actually, you can disable this OpenSSL to avoid the copyright troll. But if you didn't know or you have failed to apply that, you can see through the insignatory clarity. We can implement cloud and on-premise. We also integrate the container. We also provide SQL API, so you don't need to worry about sending the uploading a file or something. You just send your software through the API. We scan it for you, and then you can get result also through the API. Current reseller and partner in South Korea, Japan, actually Taiwan and onward security, China. We have another partner, bearing point in Europe. Our current client is Cisco. Cisco is from the United States, not any other else. And then Siemens, which is in Europe. Hyundai Mobilities, which is they're looking for the Hyundai is a very big motor company in South Korea. Hikvision is China. I think they are #1 CCTV manufacturer in the world, but recently they decided to use the Insight Clarity rather than other open software. We actually last week we got the confirmation from the Korean National Defense Army choose us to examine open source software. So this is the logo from the Korean National Army. So this is all I have today. So if you have a question, you can send a question in the chat menu, or you can ask anybody to us, to me, or Honor Security, because Honor Security or our partner to using our to in working with together. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. If you have, as I said, if you have some questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Yongsu. Now our Director of Product Development of World Security is going to share the secret with us that how DSAP address challenges in product security. Let's welcome Jackie.
Hi. Hi, good day. I'm Jackie from Onward Security. I'm currently in charge of Product Development Division, lead the team to develop a cybersecurity assessment product. The objective of this presentation is how to build a DevSecOps process inside a software development team. Under the trend of global security, more and more security regulation requirements and the standards have been announced and instituted. Enterprise need an effective measure to enhance security of their own products. In our experience, DevSecOps is a suitable framework to improve security during each software development iteration continuously. My briefing consists of 3 parts. First part, before introduce DevSecOps, we have to talk about Devops. That is now an important technical in the world. And let's take a look at left side of this slide. It's a traditional waterfall development process. Different teams operated independently and rely on document to transfer information. This could cause many problems. And on the other hand, the DevOps team work together and share information. DevOps is a set of parties that combine software development and IT operators together. With this framework, team is integrated together and let development, operation, quality assurance team cooperate to produce software efficiently. This measure have many briefings. The advantage of DevOps for software developers are speed, quality, scalability, and collaboration. This advantage must build on 5 major technical. This technical support DevOps, then make the process and the parties effectively. Conversely, there is still some problem with DevOps because each team has different goals. Developer can care about schedule instead of security, and quality assurance team don't have enough time for security testing. But software engineers use a lot of open source to improve development performance, and this could make more valuable of product. Next, I would now like to move onto the situation of global security regulation. In this slide shows some common regulations, such as medical device regulation. This regulation was officially published on May 5, 2017 to promote the secure by design concept in the medical industry. Also, the U.S. Department of Defense announced the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification (CMMC) in February 2020 to push their supplier improve security of network connected products. As the result, we show this page. We found a trend that in the future, the product without security developer procedure and security testing are not be able to sold to most regions. And also since 2016, global brands such as ABB, Amazon, Schneider have instituted their own supplier cybersecurity requirement. In this requirement, security training, threat modeling, black box testing, and incident response are already basic items. In addition, IEC, ISO, and the SAE have also introduced security standards for particular industrial to provide a framework for security assessment and verification. In order to meet that requirement, security parties need to be added into the Devops process. First, need a process for training and educating employees about IT protection. Second key point is threat modeling. This can identify potential risk. Team would able to spend, develop, and test resources to against the threat from the internet. Then perform static analysis during the build stage to find programming syntax issues such as double free, use after free. Finally, do compliance validation and instant response to reduce the impact of security events. In conclusion, DevOps is now become DevSecOps after integrate those of security parties. Moreover, there are still some problems that need to be solved when we try to build DevSecOps. Security parties definitely will increase the workload of each member. So the key point is how to deal with those parties automatically. And all of three teams need some automatic function, such as auto risk analysis for development team. An instant alert and management function can help operation team to reduce their workload. An automatic cybersecurity testing solution for quality assurance team. As a result, DevSecOps can bring many benefits, such as enhanced security awareness of team and understand the main security branch via the process of threat modeling, and effectively manage security news, event, and vulnerability during each software developer iteration. Then the team can against the security threat continuously. However, the developer of DevSecOps process usually encounter many problems. Therefore, Onward Security provides the necessary support via Hercules. And in our experience, a developer and the operating team have following problem. First, some developer team are just going through the motion because security practices are extra and heavy loading. Second, security intelligence comes from around the world. This makes information collection difficult. Third, manage multiple systems could be very difficult. And our Hercules SecFlow consists of vulnerability database and security event database to support the user. And then, in other hand, the quality assurance team, they face on different issues. The issue is too many security assessment tools to use. And SecDevice provide an easy-to-use interface. A user can start security testing in just 5 minutes and waiting for an integrated assessment report. And let's take a look at this flow chart. This is the Hercules SecFlow. SecFlow help user collect security vulnerability, weakness, event, and instance from the internet, and integrate into a threat database to support user manager product vulnerabilities. As you can see, based on search and information sharing platform, team member can obtain security, stability, and processing progress. This provides a better way for team members to cooperate and deal with the problem. And also, since security testing can be very complicated, a QA member will require a security testing tool that more simplified, economic, and easy to use. And the product Hercules SecDevice provides more than 120 test cases, include backdoor scan, CVE non-vulnerability testing, and fuzzy testing, and web injection testing. In an average case, require only 1 month, the security testing procedure can be established in a testing lab. As you can see, we show in this slide, Hercules provides a comprehensive function to help users deal with security issues. More importantly, the platform can help teams get balance between schedule and the security. Over 10 functions provided by Hercules to support users for handling DevSecOps practices, such as open source risk management, firmware scan, fuzzy test, and so on. And finally, I would like to sum up the main point. Hercules can effectively shorten the import time of DevSecOps process, lower the threshold of security testing to support developer and the quality assurance team. And through Hercules, IoT device manufacturer could easier handle DevSecOps. And thank you. If you are interested in our Hercules product or DevSecOps solution, please let us know. We will provide further information and the detail.
Thank you, Jackie. Today we have the other important partner from Remini, Mr. Rohil, the cybersecurity evangelist and consultant of Remini Technologies. He's talking about API security solution. So I'm gonna let Mohit to share his slide with us.
Thank you, Ginger. Good afternoon to all. So the intent about everybody is speaking about IoT security in the beginning, and we had some we had the Insignia people talking about open source consumption and open source, and then we just had about how DevSecOps can be deployed. So in a nutshell, I'll start with saying, all these technical languages, when we speak across to customers, it makes it very, very difficult for them to comprehend the various names and acronyms in the IT industry and typically in the security industry we're giving. So as a punchline, our organization, we say we are trying to make security simple, because security is actually very simple, but the way it is positioned across, it becomes very, very difficult for the IT guys and typically the CIOs and CTOs to keep on acknowledging or understanding new technologies. So today I'm going to spend some time, which is going to cover, I think, a lot on topics on the APIs and application program interface. So I'm sure all of you would have heard about application program interface, which is the initial early days when you had to connect. I'm talking about the DOS environment and the Windows environment, Windows 3.1 and those environments where you had to connect a printer and you would get a printer driver, a DLL file, and then you had to install that on your software to be able to communicate to a printer. Or you had those hardware locks, as you used to call them, dongles, right, for securing your software against piracy. So you would actually write some APIs to communicate to that, to talk to that. So those are those traditional APIs which were there, but in the modern era, everything has moved across to the web. Everything is on the web, typically. So what's trending right now in the global markets is digital transactions adoption. Globally, everywhere we're seeing that the digital transaction is improving, increasing day by day. The other important thing which is growing is intelligence-driven security. Now, most of these topics which I'm talking about are all interlinked to DevSecOps directly and indirectly. So intelligence-driven security is typically, it is available on DevSecOps on the if you look at the Gartner report on DevSecOps on the stage 11, right? Then you got open source. I think we had Insignia people speaking about open source for the last 5.5 years has been increasingly growing up and up. And with the vulnerabilities on the open source vulnerability, which was on OpenSSL, discovered in, I think, 2012. And then we got APIs. API is the next in thing, which is being consumed exhaustively by every and any organization. Now, again, API is linked to open source, and API is linked to DevSecOps, and API is linked to security assessment, because APIs are now a very, what do you call, a strong part of any application. Typically, be it an IoT application or be it an IoT device, everything is using an API right now. Then we're talking about data breaches, which is again increasing, as clearly mentioned by Jackie and other panelists earlier. And then, of course, network isolation. Now, that's something which is taking off very gradually and increasingly important as organizations in the critical sector are trying to isolate their networks. And then fast testing has been here for a long time, but now it's actually starting to take shape where organizations, as we saw earlier in the presentation by another panelist, where organizations have started having mandatory rules and regulations before they are allowed to be able to deliver their technologies into any organizations like ABB, NTT, I think it was also AT&T and Verizon. So these mandates have been out for quite some time now. And across, even in India, we are having some mandates coming out, typically on the IoT and the, in terms of open source and fuzzing. So what's an API? API is it's like a middleware software which is required to communicate between two disparate systems, right? And typically now API is also available on the open source community. Now, like Insignia panelists mentioned very candidly, open source does not, it comes with limitations, right? I spent some time in the open source community for around 4 or 5 years. I correctly mentioned, there are thousands and thousands of license types one needs to be aware of. If you used any of those license types, you could lead, it could lead to a legal or a serious issue which could bankrupt your company. That's important to understand because of the fact the license over there, like a GPL license, may not allow you to commercially sell your software, or you may be asked to sell your software with your source code. So which is, again, as far as I'm concerned, is both security issue. Why is it a legal issue? Because you need to give your source code out. It means your intellectual property is zero. And security wise, it's a major issue is if you are leaking that information out, or if you're putting that information of your code or the changes made in your code to the public, you are actually exposing that code which could be consumed by organizations to the hacking community. So it's very important to understand that. Another important thing to understand on the APIs, I'm relating it back to DevSecOps and also to open sources. API is also open sourced. If you go back to the community like Nordic, etc., you'll find API gateways where you have thousands and thousands of APIs being listed across to be consumed. Those APIs may or may not be free, because you, again, like a license in an open source, have a content which says terms of consumption. You need to be aware of those terms. What are the limitations and liabilities you've got to absorb while consuming an API? So these are basic fundamental things which you need to understand about APIs and API security and API licensing. Now, coming back to the technology aspects, we're looking at typically 4 types of APIs. One is the RESTful, which I think more than 95% of the worldwide community is consuming right now. The predecessor to this was SOAP, which is still being consumed by large organizations in typically client-server architecture applications. And the traditional ones like JSON RPC and the XML RPC. These are traditional old APIs which were being consumed. Another language which is coming up, or I would say a format which is coming up, which is being promoted by Facebook, which is not mentioned here, is because it's still to pick up to a number which could mean a decimal or a percentage of a point, is GraphQL. So GraphQL is another application interface which is picking up very slowly and gradually, but typically right now it's aimed at the Facebook type users. Now, what are the advantages of using an API? Now, like correctly mentioned on by the first panelist, IoT, right? How do you want to make your IoT? How can you make your IoT in compliance? The other important thing to understand is when you're looking at the Internet of Things, you need to understand that your competition is as quick or maybe better than you. So what are organizations doing? They are using a lot of APIs which are being available on different API platforms, freely available, chargeable basis, etc., which they are consuming to use. Now, the important thing is APIs will help you to do the automation. Why? Because you can cut down a lot of processes by just using or consuming APIs rather than having a team create an API. 2, APIs can be application specific. In terms of what we mean is it can be an API typically focused for a critical system, or a, let's say, API for e-meter, electronic meter for your electricity, or it could be a gas meter, right? Or it could be a API typically for the financial applications or a football game, right? So they are very specific APIs. Now you have segregation of APIs which are being available there. So for example, Twitter has its own API, Facebook has its own API which goes into social media. Then the other important thing to understand is APIs will also help you to enhance your scope, right? In terms that you can use APIs to give a customer a better experience, what you want, right? So most organizations use a mixture of 60-40, whereas 60 or 70% of the APIs are custom APIs they build, but 40% of the APIs like social networking and other consumption APIs like, for example, forecasting, they may use a third-party API which is available on any of these API gateways. So this helps you to increase the scope and a better deliverable platform. Then, of course, the other important thing is APIs are easy and modular. Now, when you are using an API-based mechanism using microservices of delivering your solution, let's say an IoT solution, if the change is made in the front end, it need not affect the back end and vice versa. So you can modularly change, and go to market becomes much more quicker for you as compared to changing it. So for example, we were discussing internally with our development team just I think yesterday in a team call. I said, are we guys modular in terms of our microservices on our platform? And the answer was yes, because any change made in the backend on my APIs in my database structures was not impacting the front end created in React.js or in basically on React.js. So that's what we mean by that. Next important thing to understand is efficiency. What do APIs help us to do? We are able to go and cut down, a lot of development work. We're also able to ensure that you have different modular APIs available for different parameters. These can be closely knitted with your singular APIs in terms that, yes, you can have a granular control without compromising on the security of your application. Because like correctly mentioned on the presentation by one of the panelists on the number of vulnerabilities which have started appearing on the IoTs. Yes, you need to be aware of that. Then of course, adaption, which is integration and personalization, sorry. And integration, of course, will help you to integrate very critically into different applications which you want. For example, if you're having an IoT and you are looking at, let's assume that you've got multiple devices which control the electricity or which control the lighting system or the air conditioning system or the heating system, you would have different APIs and all of them would combine back because the vendors for each of those APIs could be different or could be one. But the platform which is delivering this, which is helping you manage the application through your mobile phone or through an application or through a cloud service, is an API. So you can personalize APIs for different customers very easily. And adaption, of course, this ensures that as and when technology advances, you don't have to change a lot on your front end and back ends. You could just replace those APIs to do much more quicker deliveries in terms. So with this, we come to the main topic, which is on why do I need to do API testing? So there are two aspects to API testing. One is the legal issues, which I discussed earlier, is you need to know the terms and conditions of usage for an API. Two, you need to know exactly what is the structure of an API. I'll just give you a very simple example. This was, I think, around 3 months ago before the lockdown happened in India, in the month of, I think, not 3-4 months ago, in the month of February. I was with one of the largest bankers in the country, and they had two questions for us. One question they had for us was, I do not know the list of APIs being consumed in my application because the team which started with that integration is no longer available, and the OEM which had supplied us the solution may not have the right people available to give us the description. So we need to have a list of a discovery process wherein you can scan our application to give us a list of all the APIs being consumed. Now that's a tough question because of the fact, as you see, a web URL is an API, but an API is not a web URL typically. So that means you'll have to segregate, or you'll have to basically scrap the entire web application using a proxy to figure out what are the web URLs and what are the APIs, and then run them through the basic specification of those 4 types of APIs into which category do they belong to, and segregate those APIs. Two, most of the API testing which was being done was being done in this particular bank was manual. That means the guy was just doing a hit and try method. That means there's a dark room and there are 1,000 people inside that room, and I give a person a gun and I say shoot all the enemies. He just shoots randomly because somebody's going to die. That's for sure. Whether it's a good guy or a bad guy, that doesn't make a difference right now because it's a dark room. So similarly out here, API testing normally is done manually, which means a lot of scope is left untouched. And that also depends on the experience of the person who's doing the API testing, right? Three, the number of APIs or endpoints consumed. Have you tested all of them? Typically, they miss out a huge number of API endpoints which are there, which are required for testing. Four, you could land into a legal terms of usage of your API because you've consumed an API or the supplier has given you an API where, just like it said copyright, right? There was a copyright notice on the API, right? Which leads to a legal issue for you for where the vendor can, the person who's made the API can sue you. Five, traditional tools. whenever we ask people what tools are they using for API testing, and I get the names like, I use Burp Suite, I use HP40, Micro Focus Fortify, or I use some of these traditional tools, Acunetics, etc., or Checkmarks. And my answer to them is, they are not, or even they say Caledon, or they say some of these names. My answer to them is, those are tools, the Caledon, etc., or let's say SOAP UI Bear, are tools for doing a functional testing, not a security testing, right? And they do not give you the legal issues or licensing issues. And some others, the ones like I said, Acunetics and Burp Suite, only give me the URLs. Again, it's like going into a room, shooting in the dark. It could be a web UI or it could be an API, right? And again, the testing is limited there. So those traditional tools are no longer sufficient to do that. Another important point to note when API testing is, have you tested any unexposed or untested APIs? Because what happens typically in every organization, which is very standard like 80-20 theory, is 80% of the time, 20% of the time, they don't remember 80% of the APIs they have consumed. They miss out a huge number. And during an audit, also when you have third-party auditors doing this, if it's a manual process, you don't come to know. Then the next important point is, are the endpoints secured enough? What typically developers do is, they do not follow the right pattern of writing an API, whether it's a RESTful or a SOAP. They just write what they've done in the past 20 years. I'll candidly put it, every time I talk to a developer and ask him on the open source component, and I ask him what version of the open source component is he using, say for example, I say Apache Struts, he'll say I'm using 2.3.7, whereas the latest version of Apache Struts is 3.8.2. And I say, why are you not using it? Oh, well, I've been using it for the last 3 of my organizations. It's a perfect, valid pattern. You need to understand that endpoint could get exposed with that open source component, which could lead to a vulnerability. Similarly, you may not have protected your endpoint because of a bad practice, like a practice on the header, which tells me exactly that on this particular endpoint, the web services being used are Linux and the version number is so and so, and it allows me to use methods like get, put, post, delete. So for me as a hacker, by just looking at examining a header, I can figure out ways to attack that API for a denial of service to start off with, before I go and get to extract data. And if you look at it in the last 3 years, the quantum of data leakage on an API on credit card information has been huge. So people are getting exposed to APIs. Last, API gateways are not created to handle API security. They have been created by API vendors. It's like a CMS or a content management system, traditional way of allowing you, like an e-marketplace, to go buy and sell your APIs. Now you have various ways of throttling an API, in which I mean is as per OWASP top 10, I think it's A5 or A6, which says that you need to do a rate controlling. That means you need to ensure that the APIs are not going to reach a denial of service. So in that case, what happens is API vendors put an API key, which looks for genuine API users to do it. But some open source or some communities like VirusTotal give you a single API key, which is a generic API key for anybody to use, for example, right? But that means what? The API gateway is not created to handle. It'll only look to handle the business aspects of the API being delivered, not the security. And last, which I mentioned earlier, is best security practices while looking at API, creating an API. 90% of the times we've seen, and when we speak to customers and when we look at manually looking at the APIs, we realize that they have missed out the most important parameters. Now, what goes into API testing? So presently in 2019, OWASP introduced the OWASP 2019 API document, right, which covers from A1 to A10, which is a precursor to the 2017 web security. Now that precursor comes as a 2019 API security. That does cover a lot of stuff, but it has also removed a lot of issues like cross-scripting has been removed. A couple of other items which were there in 2017 have been removed from in terms of API configuration. So those need to be taken care of. So what we normally suggest is when people are doing an API security is to look at API in terms. Our approach is what? We first will scan your entire web app to get a list of all the APIs or embedded APIs or URLs. From that URLs, we'll whitelist the APIs which are commercial APIs like Google, Facebook, etc., and segregate the non-whitelisted APIs as APIs which are custom APIs. Then we would look at your licensing and terms in case those custom third-party APIs, or I would say the Google APIs will of course give you all the terms and conditions of usage. But then we'll also look at your custom APIs you have created within that API, if in case the source code is available, to look at the terms of usage. Then of course there's going to be a compliance report. Then we would test them against a generic testing, which is to test them against the OWASP Top 10 2019 to figure out, do you suffer from any one of those before you move on to fuzzing, right? Then what we do is fuzz testing, which is mutation-based fuzzing. Because before we do all that, we also model the API. By modeling the API, I mean we do a little bit of positive test cases, 20, 30 positive test cases for each of your endpoints which you're exposing, so that we get a comprehensive where. Now again, we are DevSecOps ready because we are integrating this with CI/CD tools like Jenkins and Jira for ticketing and Jenkins for build, and we are also integrating with Selenium, etc., so that all your auto without you doing a manual. Or in case you don't use tools like Selenium, you can actually upload your CSV or an XLS file into the test cases for the positive, wherein our tool will then automatically take over. Then we fuzz test or mutate, to use mutation-based fuzzing to look at the entire RESTful API or SOAP API or JSON RPC or an XML RPC. Then once the testing is started off, it automatically reports bugs. A bug list is created using Jira. And in case you have an LDAP integration, it'll go and alert immediately the developers with the required bug. It also then refers to the bug which has been reported to the OWASP 2019 and 17 list to tell you that this particular bug is typically doing this type of an activity, which means it could be as per OWASP 2017, it is an A1 or an A2, or in 2019, it's A3 or A4. And then, of course, it gives a recommendation based on the OWASP as well as our team's research, which says you need to fix up this bug if it's critical. For simple items like the type of authentication we used, if you're using basic things like OAuth and digest auth, we don't test. We just tell you you're using a wrong mechanism. You need to you need to move into an OAuth mechanism 2.0 rather than doing a basic auth or a digest auth. And then, of course, we are DevSecOps ready. That's important because of the fact that if you're not DevSecOps ready, creating and testing an API is going to be very, very tough. So in case you have any questions, I'll leave it open.
Thank you so much, Mohi. Does anyone have questions for our speakers? You can raise your hand by clicking the hand icon. Okay, you're welcome to contact us later anytime for any inquiries. So thank you very much for joining today's event. Please help fill out the questionnaire later to win the lucky draw. We'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you so much. Bye.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on a second. I see there's a guest have questions. So I'm gonna turn on your microphone, your speaker.
Hi, so I have a question with the API security. So do you create a threat modeling for it before starting any testing?
Okay, 1 minute. So I'm gonna find our speaker. Hold on 1 second. So, Mr. Sorawet, this question for which speaker are you asking? Hello? Hello, hi. Can you hear me, Mr. Soraway? So
The
could
last
you repeat your question and which speaker are you asking for?
the Jack Lee. No, sorry. Mohit Rampal.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, unfortunately, he is got off the line already. So I will let Mohit know your question. So and I'll let him to reply your question later. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm sorry about this.
This is fine. This is fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
It was
you
nice.
so much for joining today's event and looking forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.